Ladies and gentlemen, it's 9 p.m. on a Thursday night, October 15th, 2020. The town bells have rung,
The
and
church bells are tolling.
the Gossip Pod is live. I am Tim, here tonight on a Thursday with Lance. What's up, Lance?
Oh, I couldn't be better. It's just been an amazing day so far. It's been 3.5 excellent days of the week. Yesterday we had a bit of an adventure. We might get into that just a little bit. But we have a very, very special guest this evening. We have Miss Sarah. Is it Kayleen or Kaylin? I always say Kaylin. Kaylin,
yeah,
okay.
It's Kaylin, yeah.
Okay, all right. Miss Sarah Kaylin. She's a rock star.
Aw, thank you.
Well,
I'm not sure that's true, but I appreciate it.
Are you in a band?
I am not in a band, and I could not sing or play anything if you put a gun to my head. So, unfortunately, no.
You've done karaoke?
I have not done karaoke. I will not do karaoke.
No. Okay.
I'm a really, really boring person, as we've already covered just prior to this. It is a solid hour past my bedtime right now. So.
Well, the chat room is filling up, and if you're watching this live on Twitter, Facebook, or YouTube, why don't you click the link, get your butt on over to getvocal.com and join this chat room and join this conversation, because we are sitting here speaking with Sarah Kaylin. And Sarah, you are not a band member or a rock star, technically speaking, but what is it that you do? Yeah.
Well, my background, I was a police officer for about 10 years and a detective in sex crimes. And then I went into the more research-based side of that to study forensic psychology with a concentration on serial killers and serial sexual predators, the really fun stuff. And then I kind of took that, the experience and the research and squished them all together and started doing consultancy work. And part of that has landed me very strangely in the true crime space. So I had a series on HLN last year. I do a lot of correspondence stuff for them. Not so much now because it's COVID and nobody's allowed to go anywhere or do anything. But in general, CNN, HLN will bring me on to talk about different cases and stuff that kind of fall within my wheelhouse. And then I split my time with that, actually investigating cold case homicide. So I spent the last year and a half working on a case from 1993 out of Mobile, Alabama, with the Mobile County Sheriff's Office. And like I said, I've been working on that pretty much full time for about a year and a half. And in the last 4 or 5 months, we've really amped up the investigation. So I split my time pretty evenly between home in Philadelphia and then kind of second home in Mobile, working with my partner in the major crimes unit with the Sheriff's Department down there. And we're making some pretty good headway. I don't want to jinx us, and I will knock on all things wood, but we feel like we're probably closing in on an arrest. We're hopeful at this point for the first time in a long time. So,
well, spill the tea. What's the case? Let's hear about this.
The case, like I said, it was from 1993. The victim's name was Renee Bergeron. She was discovered, actually, we're coming up on the 27-year anniversary. She was discovered on a Sunday afternoon on November 14th, just in the bushes on the side of a dirt road that runs alongside I-10 outside of Mobile, in the rural part of Mobile County. And she was found, unfortunately, decapitated and naked, and most of the fluids drained from her body. And then her head was found the next day by cadaver dogs a little further down I-10. And there was extensive mutilation to the body as well. And at the time, it was, it was a different era in law enforcement, and it was a different era just in criminal psychology. There wasn't really the same broad-based understanding that we have now about what sexual homicide looks like. And so the investigators at the time thought then that it looked like a drug deal gone bad, which kind of, it almost sounds silly to say out loud now, because so many people, everybody's watched Mindhunter and everybody watches SVU. And so everybody kind of has this general idea that, like, a coke deal gone bad does not wind up with somebody decapitated and their sexual organs mutilated. But at the time that, the defining work on the issue was not published until the late 80s by Robert Ressler and John Douglas and Dr. Ann Burgess. It was, 88, 89 was when the work that sort of would become the basis of Mindhunter was first released. And so in the early 90s, a small department in Alabama just didn't really have that in the toolkit. And so they pursued it the best they could, but to some degree, but they ran up against a lot of brick walls because they, quite frankly, just weren't sort of looking in the right direction. And it kind of fell cold. It got picked up a few times over the years, and there were more notes and some suspects looked at and stuff. But Mobile County was generous enough to bring me in and say, absolutely, come take a look and see, if you can put some fresh eyes on it and maybe a new spin on it. And I spent about a year just organizing a case, kind of going through all the original notes and all the original suspects and kind of trying to make some sense of what was all there in this pile. And then, like I said, in the spring of this year, we started taking all of that information and putting it to work on the ground. And here we are.
Well, that's really incredible. So you are officially not like a formal member of law enforcement. You operate as a consultant?
Right. So I'm a civilian,
Gotcha.
and I operate as a civilian. In this particular case, I've developed a really fantastic relationship with Mobile County. And so I am working out of the major crimes unit. I'm working with the homicide detectives there. And I've got full access and sort of full-throated run of the case. It's very unusual that an agency would entrust a civilian consultant that way. But it's been a great working relationship, and I'm actually quite hopeful that we'll continue it with other cases.
Yeah, for sure. I'm really curious about that relationship and how it all comes together. Is that something where they bring you a case, or are you looking into cases on your own, like independently, and you see some things that you feel like you should bring to their attention?
No, this one was a little bit different. I kind of started bugging Captain Paul Birch down there, who oversees the major crimes unit. I had met him through the work on the HLN series, the Oklahoma case, the Ashley Freeman and Laura Bible case, because one of the key suspects out of that case for many years was a man named Jeremy Jones. Jeremy Jones was a serial killer and just a sort of serial piece of shit all over the Deep South through the late 80s and into the early aughts. And though he was from Oklahoma and was sort of involved with a lot of the same people who ultimately would be linked to Laura and Ashley's disappearance, he had fled that area and ended up committing a rape and homicide in Mobile. And Captain Birch was at that time Detective Birch. And he was the one he and his partner were the ones that apprehended him. And it was when they were conducting their interviews on that case that Jeremy Jones first confessed to the case in Oklahoma. So when I was working on the Oklahoma case, I had gone down to Mobile to meet with Captain Birch and see if he would allow me access to Jeremy Jones's interview tapes to see if I could get a feel for, how honest he was being, just that kind of stuff. And we just developed a great rapport and a lot of mutual respect. And so after that one was kind of largely wrapping up, I just said, do you have any cold cases that I could poke around on? And so I made a trip down, and he had kind of pulled the basic information on some of them. And that one, Renee's case in particular, jumped out at me because it did look like it fell within the area that I might be able to offer some help. I mean, it clearly stood out to me as very likely being either the work of a serial predator or at a minimum a sexually based homicide. And so I thought that was definitely the kind of case I have the most to offer in terms of being a new set of eyes and bringing some new skill sets to the table. And so he said, yeah, absolutely. And we packed everything up into my car, and I went back to Philadelphia with, about 5,000 pages of case notes and got to work. And here we go.
And how old is this case? Is this from the 90s? You said 93?
1993, yeah. So the 27-year anniversary of Renee's remains being discovered is coming up on November 14th.
What was it that stood out about this most to you? Was it the condition in which her body was left, and the mutilation, and the drainage of all of the, I guess you said, all of the bodily fluids?
Yeah, I mean, everything about it, just the initial description, and then some of the initial crime scene photos. It, everything that I've studied, I've spent, at that point 2 decades researching and studying serial predation and sexual predation, and the whole thing just looked like one of my guys, is kind of how I refer to it. And so I just thought I could be useful there. And then immediately, I mean, the very first day I looked into the case, I spent a little time trying to locate the victim's daughter, who's now, in her 30s. She was 10 at the time. And I wanted to touch base and see if it was something that she felt comfortable with. Because if the family just sort of felt like, look, we really just need to move past this and not have it dredged back up again, I would not have pursued it. I would have asked Captain Birch if I could, find another case. But as it happens, her daughter, said she'd been waiting her whole life for this, for somebody to take the case seriously and really examine it. And so I've been working closely with the family as well.
Man, what does that feel like when the daughter says that they've been looking for somebody and you're that somebody? I mean, Tim and I know what that's like, because we get that a lot from everybody on a daily basis, multiple times.
Without a doubt.
Yeah, but I think if you could tell the common folks what that feels like.
It's obviously the expected answer is that it is really rewarding. And of course, there is the hope that at some point it will feel like that. Honestly, it feels like a huge amount of responsibility, and I don't take that lightly. And I have said to Amanda, to Renee's daughter, from the beginning, that I certainly cannot promise there's going to be a resolution to this, or that there's going to be an arrest, because it is, at that point, 2.5 decades old. And we didn't know if there would be any kind of physical evidence. We didn't know if suspects would be alive, and I didn't want to make promises that we couldn't keep or give any kind of false hope. But I said that I will stay on it until every single stone is turned over and every single avenue is explored. And I will tell you, I'll be able to say to you that there was at least finally an exhaustive and thorough investigation. And she said that that's all she ever really expected. So, I'm excited about the idea that we might be able to actually give her some real answers. And her mom, the victim's mom, is still alive. Oh. Like I said, I'm wary to get even my hopes up too high for that. But we're certainly making great progress, and we certainly feel like we've got a couple of really interesting people in our sights.
So is this shaping up to be one of those cases?
Can't say too much. It's an active investigation.
Okay. But is this shaping up to be one of those cases where we find out, we open up the Twitter machine one day and it's like, oh my gosh, this case was solved. There was an arrest made.
I certainly hope so. I mean, we're having conversations with the district attorney.
Great.
And we're having, yeah.
Is there a DNA angle at this point?
So there was a rape kit that had never been tested for DNA, as well as fingernail clippings from the victim that had never been tested for DNA. We got permission from the sheriff and to go outside of the state lab system, which could obviously take a very long time, with all the cases that they handle. We got permission to go outside of the system and use a private lab. And we've been working with Pure Gold Forensics, Susanna Ryan, out in California, who's the absolute best of the best. And I guess what I will say is, yes, we have recovered some male DNA from some of the tests.
You know what I love? I love being inspired by stories like this, because you said that this person really the best of the best, in regards to DNA. Whenever we talk to somebody and they're talking about their DNA person, the people that they find are the best. Like, they're always saying that this person's the best. And I think that type of energy just kind of attracts each other. I'm sure there was some universal thing that brought you and this person together, and now you have your best, and it's
Oh, well, I appreciate that. It was actually Jared Bradley at MVAC who introduced us, who said that that he is also the best. Now, I have a side note, because I just got off of a Zoom interview, or some sort of an interview, whatever one of these is, with Jared, and he said, "Please tell Lance that I sent him a message a week ago, and he has not answered me yet." So
Was he talking about Lance the DJ?
He might have been talking about Lance the DJ. That might be what the confusion is, or maybe he sent it to Lance the DJ.
Sometimes, like, he sends Twitter DMs, and if I'm looking at Twitter on my phone, I do not see the DMs, and I end up I totally
and I'm being a pain in the ass and calling you to the table, but I actually even told him that. I was like, "Oh no, I don't think he looks at the DMs that much, because I do the same thing. I send it."
No, just tell him I was ignoring him. I don't want his.
Well, you can tell him that now. I've passed on the message. I was just asked to give you.
What are you drinking there? You got a little red wine? Is it what do you got there?
It's 9:00 at night.
I'm not
judging.
I'm not shaming you.
No one's judging, Judgy baby.
Oh, there we go. Okay,
I was just curious what you were drinking.
I am drinking. It's Jose somebody Malbec that came with my Naked Vines subscription.
Oh, you do that too? I do that as well. The Naked, I do.
Yeah. It's I don't know if it's wine or vine. I can never remember.
I do Naked Wines.
You know which one I'm talking. Naked Wines. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's fantastic. We should let me get a little plug going here for Naked Wines.
Oh, absolutely. They should totally sponsor.
I know, and the chat room is
chat room's on fire.
The chat room is on fire, and I want to ask a question. Someone had a question about sorry, I'm scrolling back here. Long-time listener, first-time caller. For someone wanting to go into forensic psychology like you, what would you recommend, Sarah?
Well, I am always a hardcore nerd at heart, and so I say, do the track, the study track, go to school. I mean, that sounds, it's easier said than done, but I mean, you just start with the sort of the fundamentals of just like a basic psychology degree, do the associate's work, which I totally recommend doing through a community college. It's so much cheaper than trying to do it, starting out all 4 years at a state school. And then moving up through and doing the concentration as you go further along. There are lots of good programs. I did my stuff through Tiffin University, which is a private university in Western Ohio. But they do a lot of stuff online. And I know they have a forensic psychology master's program, I believe, that you can do entirely online. I think. But there are so many good schools, and especially now with COVID, everybody's online. I love that route. I love going the academic route. I mean, I'm really glad I have the law enforcement experience, and it's definitely opened some doors for me in terms of this consultancy type work that I wouldn't have. I might not have had otherwise, but I love the research personally. I can't get enough of it. I love writing papers and nerdy stuff like that.
How long do you typically set as a goal when you write a paper? Because I'm going to come from 5 minutes. I'm going to come from
that's a tweet.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I was going to say. We come from a world where, you have to say what you need to say it in 160 characters or 180 characters or less. And then we have a good friend and frequent guest on the show, Professor Elizabeth Yardley, who sends us her papers. She sends us anything that might be relevant to what we're talking about at the time or something that we have talked about in the past. And they're so in depth, and they're, minimum 30 pages. So many sources that she
Yeah.
cites. So what do you do when you go into this? Like, what's your mindset? Do you say, I need to get it to this length? I need to make sure I've cited this many, or do you just kind of let it happen organically?
Well, usually if you're doing it through an academic program, there are standards that you have to meet. You know, I mean, if you're doing it as part of a master's track or a PhD track or something like that, the class is going to give you the minimum, amount of, like, the minimum length of the paper. And then in my book, you can never cite too many sources. I mean, anybody whose work you are using or paraphrasing or that you thought about when you formulated an idea should get a citation in your own work. I just am a big believer on the importance of intellectual property and attribution to sources. And I grew up in an academic household. I'm literally the only person in my family without a PhD. And to me, I was taught at an early age there was no higher sin than plagiarism. And so I just think you can't be too careful, and you can't cite too many sources, of anybody whose work you're studying from. But in terms of the length of time, I'm probably a terrible person to ask, because I'm legit ADD. I have a tendency to think a lot about what I want to put in it and formulate some ideas, and then not actually sit down and begin typing ththings until the last possible moment. So if it's a 10-page paper, I can knock it out in a day. If it's a more exhaustive, like, research study, obviously it takes more time, but whatever that length of time is, I will walk right up to the window and then kind of look around and then scream at anybody who comes near me or interrupts me over the, whatever the length of that time is to get it done. I'm terrible. But I've had success with procrastination. And so I'm probably, I'm in my mid 40s now. I'm not going to unlearn that trick.
It's a really healthy thing to do when you come to terms with something like that. And you say, I'm not going to get frustrated by my procrastination anymore. I'm going to figure out how to make it work for me. So I tip my hat to you.
It took me a long time. Thank you. It took the point of going back through school again, like having to start school over again, because my undergrad was in theater. Like, I had been through school, I thought I was done, and then was like, no, you know what I really want to do is be a cop. And so going back through, it was well into that second time around that I was like, just embrace it and just find a way to make it work for you. And now I have a 16-year-old kid who I'm constantly telling, stop waiting until the last minute. But I don't know.
I want to make a quick correction here. Well, not correction, but clarification. First, I want to address that Shannon has officially applied for your personal assistant job. So if you need a personal assistant, Shannon has applied for that officially here. And Esther said,
thank you, Shannon. I have no money, but if you want to do it for free,
it could be an internship.
Yeah, there we go.
And Esther said that I said I take my hat off to you and then left my hat on. I actually said I tip my hat to you, and I actually did tip my hat. So
he doffed
I doffed my cap at her.
Oh no, please, no, it's so bad.
Ever the gentleman.
Well, the chat room is blowing up. We've got Esther Hilton in there. We've got Rebecca Sebastian in there. Of course, Michelle from PIs for the Missing is in there. Jillian, Greg Overacker, private investigator Greg Overacker, who we just joined yesterday on a search for a missing person. It was a pretty. I would say it was a great day in that we checked something off of the list. We got we brought some film equipment, so we got some great film, and we will be able to share some of that with everyone. Elise Crime Shack is not chopped liver. Also in the chat room, lots of other people in the chat room as well. Sorry, I don't want to miss anyone, but
I personally am a fan of chopped liver. You cook that the right way, delish.
No, exactly. I'm with Michelle.
Yeah.
No,
half of what I say on Get Vocals is just to irritate Michelle, and yeah.
The people in the.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay,
Yeah.
that's good to know.
Pardon my interruption, Tim. Please proceed.
PTI.
Like a lighthouse attendant, like really forcing the accent. Now you're like an American lighthouse attendant in England.
I don't. I'm not feeling it tonight. The pressure's on, so it is a bit forced. It's not as spot on as it usually is.
Right.
Is it? Okay.
Greg, do you want to hop on? Greg is in the chat room, and if he wants to hop on, we can talk a little bit about this this search yesterday. But and if not, we'll have Greg on a proper episode, and we've got some great audio and video. Like I said, coming for this shoot. There's a big hole in the ground, and we met some really impressive cave people. Who cavers?
They're. I went through the whole process. I actually referred to them as cave divers, and our guide said, "Oh, I'd never do that." She goes, "That is way too dangerous." She's like, "You're down there," and then I was like, "Oh, wait, am I misspeaking?" And she goes, "No, cave diving is when you're underwater. Like that's technically cave diving." She goes, "This is just caving. We're cavers." I'm like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah. Yeah, that cave diving.
No,
I got out of the car. I got out of the car, and she saw my Crawlspace sweatshirt, and she was like, "You got to take that shirt off right now." I was like, "Why? It's the name of the show." And she's like, "That's like, I don't know. I guess she was getting at that was bad luck. She was just being kind of jokey."
It's a bad change.
No.
Yeah.
She loved your shirt. She loved it. She wanted it to. She wanted to have it for herself. I think I'm hearing myself through Greg.
I think there's a little echo, Greg, if you don't mind turning down the volume a little bit. Yeah, we got to send her a shirt or something. That was pretty funny.
Yeah, we're putting together a whole merch bag for a merch box, but great stuff.
Her name is Emily Mobley, and she's very Googleable. Actually, pretty much world famous for what she does. And we were really lucky to get to meet her and speak with her about it.
She's a pretty unique person, wasn't she?
It's very cool.
Can you hear me? She's a pretty unique person, wasn't she, Emily?
She is a unique person, yeah. Really interesting lady. She has this urge in her, this drive to explore as deep as she can into the earth, and I cannot relate to that.
No, and as a matter of fact, we were talking with her, and I asked her why she does what she does, because she was talking about how, the danger in it, how it has to be very precise. Even when we went to the hole into the cave, when we went there, for like right off the bat, she was clearing out all the debris because she didn't want anyone tripping. Like that's her first thought, like clear off the debris, check for roots. I don't want anyone tripping. Stay within a body length. If you can stand within a body length of the hole, the closer you get, you're required to get on your hands and knees, because if you fall from a body length, you're not going to fall into the hole. So she has all of the safety precautions. And I asked her why you did that, or why she did that. And she said, have you ever done anything in your life where you can walk into a room of 100 people and ask them if they've ever seen something that no one else on earth has seen? And you're the first person. And like, no, I've never been able to do that. And except for 2 lances at a small wedding that I've seen, but so she gets to explore, and she gets to see things that no one else on earth will probably ever see. No, just a handful of people.
Yeah.
She said all my friends would raise their hand because they've all been in those places.
Right. Yeah. If she was in that room with all of her friends, they'd raise their hands. Yeah.
You remember her scolding me when I got close to the cave? She's like, "Oh, whoa."
Yeah. Which time? She scolded you a number of times. Yeah. She's not to be reckoned with. She's not reckoned with, trifled with. She's not to be trifled with.
So I hope you got that on film when I said to her, you were standing there and I said, "Emily, tell Lance about when you broke your leg in the cave." Did you get on film? That's an amazing story. So she was in, was it New Mexico? I think it was part of Crawlspace. But she said she was down in this cave and a boulder fell on her and broke. She told us what bone it was and everything. It took them 4 days to get her out of the cave. 4 days. And I'm like, what? How far down were you? And I don't remember what she said, but it's on. Hopefully it's on there. Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah, she was like what did she say? 1,000 feet? I think she said 1,000 feet, and it took they moved her in increments over the course of over the course of the 4 days. They moved her out. The way she broke her leg, I didn't understand what she had said at first, so I had to have her repeat it because I couldn't wrap my head around it. She said she was reaching for like a handhold, and I thought it was something that was like prefabricated in, like there was like rungs or something. A handhold is a rock. So she was reaching for a rock, and when she kind of lifted herself up, it came loose. She fell backwards. The rock rolled down and hit her leg and smashed her leg.
Oh.
Unbelievable. And I was like, you were in pain for like 4 days down there? And she looked at me and she was like, no, they brought me drugs. Yeah.
Oh, good.
To listen to them talk, it's so professional. She goes, guys, they were prepared. But you can go on YouTube and look up Emily Mobley and watch that. They've got scenes from it. And there's guys pulling her 200 feet on a stretcher, 250 feet inside the cave to get her from one position to another. It's amazing. And then they had to camp out. They're camping out for 4 days. I don't camp out in my backyard for 4 days. You know?
I'm curious, now that we have Greg Overacker on, who is a private investigator, and Sarah, you're former police officer, and you work as a consultant. So you're on that side. Greg's on the more independent contract basis, I guess. What's your feeling on how that relationship should work as a police officer, between a police officer and a private investigator, and you're working on the same case?
Yeah, do tell.
Oh, goodness. I think it probably, I mean, this is going to sound like a cop-out answer, but I really think the truth of the matter is it would be unique to every single situation. There's an infinite number of possibilities of combinations between, if you look at the agency in charge and their skill set and their resources, what the case is, and then the private investigators' skill set and resources, the combinations of how that could be great or terrible or something in between are endless. I would like to think in a perfect world that more situations would arise like mine, where you have a really, really great agency who is also willing to say, like, hey, you can devote a whole year to working full-time on this case. Our detectives can't do that, with a cold case, with all new homicides and sexual assaults and stuff rolling in all the time. And then find a way to kind of make this nice marriage between the two when it's time to really, hit the ground and start doing the day-to-day stuff. But I'm sure as much as I'm sure there are lots of really skilled consultants and private investigators, there are probably more, and I would imagine Greg has probably run into this as well, who probably shouldn't be monkeying around in agencies' business. And at the same time, there are agencies that don't know their ass from a hole in the ground and could probably use a really good outside person to come in, So, and then that whole gray area in the middle. So, I think you'd have to tell me a case and everybody involved to say whether or not I thought people were making the right decisions.
Yeah, that was a very, very, very good answer. Very well-rounded answer. I think that's something that Greg. Yeah, very diplomatic. Yeah. And,
but I mean, I really mean it too, because it really does. It really does just depend on what everybody is bringing to the table and what everybody's intentions are as well when they get there.
Oh yeah. Can I set you up real quick with it?
Sure.
Greg has had some frustrating moments with law enforcement, and I personally love
sure. I have too.
I love hearing his stories. I love hearing his very direct approach to it. So Yeah, you can reply now, Greg. I just wanted to get that in there before I forgot.
Yeah. So it's a difficult situation where police can't they have to keep us at an arm's length. That's why it's usually a one-way street, because if they end up in a courtroom and a defense attorney says, why are you employing this citizen? He's not an accredited police agency. He's not accredited by the state or whatever. They can get into trouble there. But the defense attorney's not going to touch that if we give them something good, something really good that they know enough to stay away from in question. So yeah, there's a reason that they don't want to commingle too much. So we don't mind when it's a one-way street. That's why we don't want to touch it. We give them something and then it's yours. It pisses us off in certain aspects, but depending on what it is, and again, but case by case kind of thing. I get frustrated with the police because when I did bail enforcement, the thing they used to say was we were to law enforcement what FedEx was to the post office. Because when they hired us and they said, look, this bail jumper's gone, he's in, out in the Midwest, we get in our car and go. We pack up and we're gone. Your girlfriend says, well, when are you going to be back? I don't know. When I'm done. We're gone for a week, gone for 3 weeks, whatever. You're going to figure it out. That's all you're doing 24 hours a day is going after this person. You're going to find him and that's it. The police, on the other hand, when they have something to do, they're like, oh, yeah, we'll do that on the 19th. And then the 19th comes around and they have a shooting 2 days before. And we're like, oh, we're going to bump that. We'll have a meeting about that next week. And then the next week comes along and something comes up. And it ends up getting, in Brianna's case, stuff just gets months and months. And we get to the point where, do your fucking job. I mean, somebody needs to do this, but they're overloaded. They're the police. They have tons of stuff coming in. It pisses you off. And we got to the point where we would have situations like one of our witnesses moved to the Keys, the Florida Keys. And I'm like, all right, so they're not going to do this. So Bruce would question the police. Are you going to go out and take care of this and stuff? Well, I don't know. Well, Greg's got it. Okay, we'll do it. They don't want someone beating them to the punch. The fact of the matter is, you want to blame them and you want to get pissed off at them, but they got to go to their boss. They got to find the money. The money's got to come from the people in that town or the state or whatever. And it's aggravating. It's bureaucracy, and it's not their fault. But it's a shitty way to do things. It really is. There's no better system that you can think of for a government agency to function, but it's not.
Well, but see, that's where I think the larger conversation that we're having about, what policing should look like in America. One of the things that I think we could do better is to say in lots of different areas that maybe there are things where we are asking the police to carry too much of a burden, where we're asking them to address every single ill all at the same time. And that is why they are overloaded. And, 80% of police departments in this country are classified as small agencies with 50 or fewer officers. So when we talk about policing, we think of NYPD and LAPD and stuff. But the reality is that, American policing is done by small departments. And it is too much to ask them to be social workers and homicide investigators and rape counselors and everything in between. And so the only thing I would disagree with you is saying that there's no other way to do it, because I think if we're able to step back and go, let's reevaluate a little bit of where some of these resources can go to bringing in experts and outsiders to handle certain things, it then relieves, it's like a pressure valve for all the other stuff that they're doing. And they're better able to address the things that really only the men and women with tactical response and guns and stuff like that can go in and address.
That's a big thing right now, where people say, "Oh, you're going to defund the police. You're going to defund the police." Wait, stop. They're not talking about.
Right. Oh, it's a terrible slogan. I've talked about that.
24 people down to 3. It's not the point. The point is that, especially if you live in a metropolitan area, every time an ambulance goes somewhere, the fire department shows up too. Every time. this huge piece of machinery shows up that gets, a gallon every half mile. These guys get out, they stand there, they get back in, and they leave. We've got an apartment building in the town next to me. It's a huge apartment building for elderly people. Their smoke alarms go off at every half hour, right? Because it's a bunch of old people. And everybody gets in their vehicles, and everything goes off, and they go down. It's a waste of money. It's the same thing with the police. You talk to local friends of mine that are local cops and stuff. A lot of them are getting ready to retire now. They're like, thank God. But they're everything. They're social worker, priest, ambulance. They're everything. They're showing up and they're going to take care of everything. They shouldn't have to do that. It's a huge burden. Defunding the police simply means let's have people that we know somebody needs some psychiatric help or whatever. Let's have people.
But they're not violent. They have no history. You know what I mean? Like,
not trained to go deal with that, and something bad may happen if he shows up and he thinks, these guys are amped up as it is. They're dealing with things that, 8 different things a night that are coming around the corner at them. If you have somebody that's going to deal with something that's their specialty, so every time somebody says defund the police, I'm like, oh.
Yeah, I completely agree. The term makes me bonkers because it's not at all what they're trying to say, and it's like, you guys, that's not great messaging, because it just gets everybody's back up, which I also understand, because I also understand these people feel like, because I was there, I was dispatched on calls literally to kids who would not sit down at dinner. Like, really? And so, the fact then it's like, well, how do I know then that there isn't some drunk driver going down the road? And everybody gets mad when it's like, oh, you're stopping me, but there's all this other stuff. Well, and so we're constantly asking the police to do everything. And it's not fair. And it's especially not fair in small agencies.
Cop shows up to that.
Where,
he's so pissed and he's so done, he's so aggravated that he throws a kid on the ground or he bitches somebody out and he just can't take it anymore. And then it's the cop's fault. Well,
even in the absence of that, even if nothing goes south at a scene, who knows where else they should have been or could have been. There's a domestic going on someplace and their 911 call, didn't get sent out as fast because there was only, 2 officers on duty that night for a little town and they were out on calls. So, like, to me, it's not even necessarily just illustrated by the examples where things go sideways. Because I feel like that's even a whole different, conversation. But just the idea that, we ask police to be a barrier and to be, the front line of defense for citizens. And then at the same time, we're asking them to do, 20 things a minute that other stuff is slipping through the cracks. And it is the stuff that is more important, the domestics and missing kids and stuff. That is more important than whether or not, your asshole kid doesn't want to sit down at dinner and I shouldn't be here for this, but if a worker gets dispatched to that instead, I'm now freed up to handle the domestic.
It's funny, the deeper you're embedded in certain work, the more glitches you see, kind of thing. So when I was bounty hunting, I was up here in New York, I would get calls from down south because they didn't want to come up. They would call you, you would pick the person up and take them down there and they'd pay you and then come home. So plus you know their area. They're down south. They know New York, blah, blah, blah. But they wouldn't extradite anyone beyond 90 miles of their border in Florida unless it was something like violent, like murder or something. They wouldn't. So people would jump bail. My husband would be in a situation where the person would get picked up in New York or New Jersey or something. They'd get picked up. They'd take them into the police agency, call down there, and the district attorney would say, "I'm not extraditing you."
Let them go. Yeah, I'm not paying to bring them down.
Up here, and she was out of her mind, and she would call in bomb threats to a bar. Now this was prior to 9/11. So they'd go and pick her up. She's calling in bomb threats. They bring in the police station. The attorney said, "Cut her loose." Finally, the bondsman calls me and says, "You got to get this person back." So what we would do is we would tell him, "Look, go to the district attorney, tell him that you're going to pay for extradition. You, the bondsman, will pay extradition." They'll put that in NCIC.
Right.
Bondsman will pay extradition. So then when they get picked up,
right,
the police agency would do it, but then the bondsman would reimburse the police agency. But we would do that. We would go pick them up, take it back. Of course, they would think it wasn't real. You know, you can't do this there because the police get cut or loose. Oh, it's real. You're going. You know, they're like, ah.
Yeah.
But that's it's a glitch.
Yeah. Half the time they know the system better
it was a
than
glitch.
we
You know,
do
that was
sometimes.
The thing too, where if you bumped into local police, small town cops, they didn't know to deal with bounty hunting or the laws. They didn't know the paperwork you were supposed to be carrying. And sometimes they would think, well, this is kidnapping. Those are serious charges. And you'd have to straighten it out with them. When you talk to state police, it was obvious that they had some kind of training in it because they immediately would recognize what was going on and say, do you have your paperwork? And you'd show it to them.
Well, and it probably, I would imagine, varies from state to state too, because I know, I mean, in some states and people, we certainly have aspects of police training that need to be addressed, but there are some states where it's really exemplary, where it's 7 months of full time, like it's a full time job. It's 8 to 5, Monday to Friday for 7 months, and you really learn your stuff, and then you get with a good agency and you continue to do training and stuff. And so I think if you're embedded in one of those agencies and you hear people saying, oh, the police training is terrible, that also gets your back up, because you're like, no, I've worked really hard for this. I've done more hours than in some cases a bachelor's degree. But then you have other places and some states, that one that I was working on a case in a couple of years ago that I discovered at this time still only has a 25-hour training requirement to become a reserve deputy in the state. And I thought 25, like it's 2.5 days or 3.5 days of work, and you're just cutting people loose with a badge and a gun. And no wonder you have problems. And so, I kind of feel for everybody in the argument.
You got so much to learn. You're handling so many different facets and so many different things. You're being trained in so many different things. How many other jobs do you know are like that? I mean, if you're a salesman or something, you know your job and you have certain things that you have to know. If you're a cop, you have to know all these different things. And then, just for example, if you have you subscribe to the CPLR, Civil Procedure Laws and Rules, or the Penal Code or whatever in your state, it's updated periodically, and you'll get the inserts, right? They'll send you that when the laws change, you get the new ones and you put them in there so that you can refer to it in your book. So in other words, laws are ever changing. And different civil rules are ever changing.
Yeah.
So, and the cop has to be aware of that, because if they say it wrong once to one person, the person's a prick forever about it, because they don't know your job,
Well, and even more importantly than that, if if a Supreme Court ruling comes down or a state Supreme Court ruling comes down, it's effective immediately on the street. And so, if you're a good officer, and I certainly prided myself on paying attention to stuff like this when I was an officer, you have to know that stuff faster than an attorney has to know it, because the minute that ruling comes down, if it's effective on the street, I have to know that when I go operate. I mean, if you imagine somebody who was working the streets in 1987 when Garner, Tennessee was passed, and said you can't shoot a fleeing felon, that's another one of those things that we all consider just kind of like, oh, everybody knows that you can't shoot somebody in the back, blah, blah, and did they do this and did they do that? That, that was a late 80s ruling with the Supreme Court. And so literally the day Garner, Tennessee happened, if you didn't know that, you're effed.
I know a lot of
if
people
you got into something
that own guns. I'm in upstate New York. I know a ton of people that own firearms. I know a ton of attorneys who own firearms, attorneys that offer to go shooting with me and stuff like that. I can tell you this, that 70 or 80% of the people that I talk to don't know the laws pertaining to firearms. They don't know that. You'll ask them simple questions and they're not certain. Well, you better learn. There was an incident years ago. My brother-in-law's a Boston police officer. This is going way back, probably in the 80s. He said there was an incident here where an FBI agent, a female FBI agent, was coming out of court, and a guy grabbed her purse, ran past her and grabbed her purse. She pulled out her firearm and she shot it. You can't protect your possessions with a firearm in that state. You can't do that. And
after Garner, Tennessee, you can't do that, period, unless he's posing an imminent risk to people, and he probably was not if he was just a purse snatcher.
Stuff, but if I was going to certain situations, that was another thing with bounty hunting. You would drive through state after state after state after state. You know, in some states you can't carry your firearm, in some you can. You know, and then you get a cop pulls you over. Do you have a gun in the car?
Yeah.
Well, I do. It's locked up in the back. Yeah,
it's funny you should ask.
Lockbox, but it's, you know, there's to tell you how much things have changed in a very short period of time. We used to put people on planes, on flights. We'd have a talk with them.
Mm.
Look, man, are you going to be a problem? No, I'm not going to be a problem. I'm just, you know, I sold some weed. I'm at, okay, I'll put you on a plane, take them in, I put them in a wheelchair, wheel them in. They'd be like, oh, we put them on the plane first, of course. I'd wheel them in, put them in their seat and go, you're going to be good, right? Yeah, I'm going to be good. And they have a nonstop flight, and the bondsman would meet them in Georgia when they got off the flight. But you wouldn't do that today. You'd think of doing that today. It's insane.
No. The airline would never let you do that either.
Well, I think
I literally have to talk to the guy like 5 times. You're not going to freak out and throttle some old lady, right? No. Okay.
I was going to interrupt real quick. Everybody, this actually is This is the premiere episode of Sarah and Greg's new podcast that's on the Crawlspace network. We're going to workshop the title of it right here, right now. We got Greg.
War stories. It's just war stories, because that's all old cops
war
and
stories.
bail bondsmen do is tell war stories.
Done.
I used to lease a gym in a town next to me, and the guy that owned it was a cop, and his dad was a cop. And Dad came in one time, and he said, we were sitting around at work today talking about and looking up all these laws that were still on the books that don't apply. There was actually a law still on the books that if a horse and carriage came down the road towards you, you had to stop your car, dismantle it, put it in the woods, let the car and the horse go by, and then you could reassemble your vehicle and go. Obviously, this was from when cars were 4 tires, a little motor, a little, lawnmower engine and a throttle. But stuff like that. One of them that was interesting was if you were going to arrest the sheriff needed to be arrested, the coroner had to perform the arrest. Yeah.
Oh, I've heard that.
Yeah,
I think that might still be on the books in some states.
So they would actually tell him how to do it and go with him.
Yeah.
But because he was kind of neutral, I think he had to perform the actual, okay, you're under arrest kind of thing. Is that right?
God, there's some states that I would imagine some coroners got a lot of extra work. There's some states that definitely have had issues with their sheriff system.
The sheriff has more.
I am not. Now, like I said, I'm working with Mobile County Sheriff's Office, and they are an outstanding agency, but they had some corruption issues with some sheriffs in the long ago days that I wouldn't be surprised if a coroner had to sweep in and
the corruption thing
make an arrest.
It's human nature. It's always going to exist. It's going to be out there, and there's got to be checks and balances. And they did away with bail reform come through. Now there's no cash bail unless it's sexual crime or extremely violent crimes. So someone can actually come to my home, burglarize my home, and they get a ticket. They get the right to come to my home and gather evidence. They get my reports with my name and my address and my phone number and everything on it. They've taken away the checks and balances of if you go for bail, you post bail and you skip town. Police don't have the time to go unless you're extremely severe. They're going to come looking for you. They don't have time to go for every bail jumper. We went and looked for them at no cost to the taxpayer. It was a private industry. The problem was that the bondsmen overreached and were corrupt and did things that they shouldn't have done and collected more money that they should have and stuff. They blamed them.
Well, and the system overreached as well, and so you would have people, in jail for months at a time for something like a $250 bond, and that's just
bond.
Horrid. Right. No, that's not you guys. That's the judicial system.
Laws. If they do something corrupt, the license should get yanked. Then it's done. It's taken care of. If the jail keeps them in, and they shouldn't be kept in, then if you steal a pair of shoes or something, obviously you shouldn't be sitting in jail for months and months and months and months. That was a glitch that needed to be fixed. But it doesn't mean you just tear down the industry.
Agreed.
It's like saying, well, there was a car accident, so we're not going to sell any more cars. So the main cry of the whole thing was, you know, Lance and I walk into a BMW dealership and Lance throws $100,000 down and says, I want that BMW. And I go, wait a minute, I don't have any money, but I want one too.
He's talking about the DJ Lance.
He doesn't have any money.
Yeah, no, this is not Crawlspace, Lance.
Does that make sense? I mean, you were saying it's unfair to poor people. Well, I'm sorry you're poor, but how much do we have to get involved with your finances? I mean, because you're poor, you're poor. It has nothing to do with the fact that you're stressed.
Yeah, but that's definitely not a statement on the bail industry, but the way that minimum sentencing happens, or, you know, bail requirements on really low level offenses, it is unfairly weighted against poor people, and it shouldn't be two different justice systems in theoretically the best democracy
relatively
on earth.
Bail was not a lot. In fact, it wasn't the percentage anymore. They just
it just should
$200, $250 or something like that. I think at the point, if you can't come up with $200 to get bailed out of jail, there's some major problems in your life. You probably don't even have a roof over your head at that point. So the jail's a godsend. I don't know, but the issues went deeper than just, you don't just tear away the whole industry. You know what I mean? Anyway.
Yeah.
You know it too well, huh?
It's another episode for War Star.
Well, did anyone see the tweet recently? Yeah, we've only got a few minutes here left to go here with Sarah Kayleen and Greg Overacker. Did anyone see the tweet from Robin Warder yesterday, where he says, and I just linked to it, he says, he's from the Trill Went Cold podcast. He said, yesterday, this man was indicted for the 1984 murder of 12-year-old Jonelle Matthews. So it's horrifying to see that he's one of my Patreon supporters. He's a patron for a couple of true crime podcasts, but I'm the only one who's covered the Jonelle Matthews case. So yikes. Holy crap, huh?
Yeah. I tweeted a comment on that. That was a feature, not a bug. So in the same way that you would find, this is, I tweeted about this, the same way psychologically that you might expect to find a killer retaining trophies or clipping out newspaper articles about their case, like staying up on it or trying to insert themselves into the investigation, showing up at funerals, stuff like this. It's just the sort of, 2020 version of that. So this guy was clearly trawling rather, AWL, a number of pods. I would speculate most likely in the hopes of finding something about this
I think
case.
Robin.
It's just it's
I think
that
you're right,
the reliving
he
the
said
adrenaline.
Robin, his podcast was the only one who's covered the case, and I don't think that case has been covered by a lot of podcasts. So I think you're right. That case wasn't very familiar to me, and we haven't covered it on this show. So yeah, I don't know too much about it. So yeah, I think it wasn't incredibly well known, but how unnerving.
They want to know what you know.
Yeah, right. And it makes me think, it makes me wonder when, right.
Well, and also, just the excitement of it. It's just the trophy factor. It's the same thing that motivates trophy collection.
Oh, yeah.
Trophy collection, like keeping mementos from your victims.
It makes me wonder if there's somebody in the chat room, if there's somebody who's commented on our YouTube videos. Like, we cover so many cases, we over the years, we've covered so many cases, and we've covered a number of cases very in depth. So I wonder, we've.
Yeah. Well, I'm here to make you feel worse and tell you that there are a lot more serial predators out there
absolutely.
Than most people.
Absolutely.
Realize.
Yeah. It's
so.
Who was the author that you had on? She had written a book. One of the things that Lou and I always talked about. Sarah, I want to hear what she has to say about this. A lot of people get away with murder, and a lot of people get away with rape. A lot of sex crimes aren't even.
Oh, almost every
Yep.
statistically gets
Yeah.
away with rape,
Well,
unfortunately. So
no one's ever writes a book about that. And I think it's probably because of the liability issue of, I'm going to name somebody that we think is responsible for a murder, but they're still alive. And if we do that, so they don't do that. But that would be an interesting book to read because people get away with it. Obviously, there's so many open cases. People getting away with this all the time. You know, it's funny.
yeah,
When I talk to friends and family and stuff, I think because of television, which, come on, television's a big portion of our lives. You spend hours a day doing something, and then it's the center of your room, your living room, everything's pointed at it.
I was just going to say, it's what Joey from Friends says. What do you point your furniture at if there's no TV?
Everybody has this concept of karma, that you're going to get what's coming to you, and I don't believe that at all. Because there are people that go through their lives, and I always use this as an example. Look at these elderly gangsters that murder dozens of people. They steal and extort people all their lives. They're horrible, horrible people, and they die elderly. Yeah, not everybody.
And they die of old age. Yeah.
You know.
I mean, even Whitey Bulger kind of got what's coming to him, but he was able to elude that for 16, 17 years and lived a pretty good life.
There was a chance he wasn't gonna.
And there's a chance he wasn't.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
A very good chance.
There was that chance that he could have breathed.
Back my elbow.
See what happens? All of these people getting away with these heinous crimes. You have Sarah, who is a goddamn rock star. She just hurt her elbow. She just smashed her elbow up.
Shit out of my elbow on the
No karma in the world.
Look what these criminals do. Look at that.
No karma. Or
I blame the criminals.
secretly
We
a
wouldn't
serial
be here
killer.
if
So.
it wasn't the criminals.
It's a very good point.
Very good point.
Might not
I
be
like
able to
that.
take them to trial
Okay.
for the elbow bruise, but we can work on it.
That was more than an elbow bruise. That was an elbow shatter. Guys,
Yeah, it's smart. So
I gotta say,
it'll be
this
I'm a
conversation was
klutz, I'm used to it.
fascinating, and the chat room really loved it. I think we need to speak offline about a potential
Aw.
spin-off here. Something that would, I think we could do some stories here.
I'll jump off. So
We'd love to do some stories. It'd be fun.
Well, we're wrapping up pretty soon.
Well, it was nice to meet you, Greg. Yeah.
Nice meeting you, Sarah.
And
We'll talk
nice
more.
to
Actually,
yeah,
I have
nice
a
to
question-
see you,
I have a
Craig.
question for you. I'm going to send it to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Okay.
Cool. Wow, Greg Overacker, everybody, private
Greg
investigator
Overacker.
extraordinaire. Greg
Yeah.
Overacker once saved a dog. He saved a dog. If it just in case you thought that his humanity had limits, it does not. He saw a dog that was freezing out in the cold, and kids were tormenting it. And he went up to it and he took it, and they said, "That's my dog." And he goes, "No, it isn't. Not anymore." And he put it in his car. I think he gave it to his sister, and that
Not
dog
anymore.
lived for like another 14 or 15 years.
Well, and I'm here to say I'd like to know what happened to those kids because we all know
Oh,
what happens
Greg
with
shot
kids who
them
abuse
with his gun.
animals, So
Yeah. Yeah, it's
Oh,
karma.
great. I'm
And he-
comfortable with that. It's karma. So,
Yeah.
they were just going to become
Yeah,
my
he-
guys
he-
otherwise.
He pulled
so.
out. I know.
And by that, I mean the people that I study and
Just
search,
to be
not
clear.
my husband and sons, to be clear.
Wow. Well, I just want to say one more thing before we end. On a personal note, and maybe I don't know, maybe you can contribute to this, Sarah. Something happened today that I noticed, and it got me fired up more than some other things have gotten me fired up, and that is the release of this podcast called Anatomy of Murder. And Anatomy of Murder is a podcast that I guess stars Anna Siganigalazi, who is the prosecutor who has concealed evidence, who has a perfect record, who is basically a reality TV show star. And she's the one solely responsible for John Juca still in prison. And Audio Chuck has released this podcast that features her. She is the star of it, and she talks about analyzing crimes, analyzing murders. And I'm putting a public call out to boycott any sponsor that sponsors that show. It's a horrifying, like disgusting person to put on a podcast.
Yeah. And Michelle, who is a current prosecutor, makes sure to clarify that Anna Signicolazzi is a former prosecutor. And when we spoke to Holt McElhaney or McElhaney a couple of weeks ago on Crawlspace, he made sure to clarify that she wasn't an actor. So these are people who are prosecutors and actors who don't want this woman to be associated with their profession. That's how much they don't like her. That's how much she's full of shit.
Right.
Wow.
She is solely responsible for John Juca and a number of other inmates who, I mean, we know John Juca is innocent. We've talked to his mom, Doreen. She has endless amounts of evidence supporting that. The lawyer, Mark Dederow.
Yeah, Anna Signicolazzi told Doreen that she's lucky she didn't take her other son.
Yes. Yeah. This is somebody who's being promoted. This is somebody who's being promoted through Castbox, Spotify, Audio Chuck. This is somebody being promoted. People in the true crime genre of podcasting are promoting this monster. And
not to mention, I think, Lance, we were texting about this earlier. This is the murder of a guy named Mark Fisher, and it's a real an incredible tragedy, the entire story. But what's really crazy to us is that we've covered the wrongful conviction of John Juca, and it's like Mark Fisher is a lost character in the story of his own murder, and it's tragic, and it's all because of Nicolazzi, and she corrupted the system to convict John Juca. And there is someone in prison who admitted that it was just him. He was in prison for the murder of Mark Fisher. And John Juca is also in prison.
For the murder of Mark Fisher.
Right.
Two people in prison. One confessed. One had evidence that was suppressed. And jury tampering. I mean, the list, it goes on and on. She's got a history of doing it. And to represent yourself, like, that's infuriating, but to represent yourself in this true crime podcast genre and in this industry where people work really hard to do to get justice, to get some sort of closure, to get something, to forward something, to put her on is taking this genre back to mindless banter, fluff, like not even entertainment. It's not productive.
Right.
Cut to frauds out there, and they're upset that Anna Signicolazzi is being called a fraud.
Wow, I'm actually not familiar with the details of that case. I've heard John Juca's name and I've heard Mark Fisher's name. I didn't know the depth of this, and obviously I now just out of kind of I trust you guys' spin or take on the issue in terms of the case, but I totally agree that this idea, I mean, this is one of the things that if CrimeCon had happened this year, the subject of my presentation that I was going to do was the portrayal of domestic violence in true crime and kind of the arc that it has taken. There was a time when it was very, it was sort of fluffy, but it actually, it was like the burning bed and the Tracy Thurman story and stuff, but it had a real impact on society, even though it was kind of schlocky. And then it kind of petered out and we didn't really talk about it that much. And now we see cases of domestic violence in true crime all the time, but they're not really discussed that way for the most part. And so I kind of wanted to, what the focus of the talk is just how valuable the genre is becoming in terms of driving real change in society. Because as the genre has gotten smarter and cleaner and more professional, it has attracted It has attracted more dollars in terms of consumer dollars. It has attracted more dollars in production dollars. And therefore it's able to kind of like up the caliber a little bit. And now it's this really powerful thing. You know, I mean, it is the number one podcast genre, and probably most documentaries are really heavily leaning this way. And so it is kind of taken this shift into activism. And I, for one, think that's fantastic. I'm really excited to be a part of that kind of true crime. And I have no interest in the schlock and the shock value. And for any platform to willingly step backwards
it's totally gross. I'm so glad to hear you.
It's gross.
I'm so glad to hear you say that, because this is a genre that was evolving into something that was more productive and was trying. And it's still is.
I think it still is. I think it still is. I think we can't be.
I don't want it to fall in like.
And
I see these things happen, and schlock is the word you use, and that's perfect. And it's like, please. What we have to do is just keep making shows. Like you and Greg having a show is a great example of that. If you guys had the time to do it, it's a great example of having a productive show that's entertaining as well. Like watching the two of you talk would be super entertaining. Finding the reality show star of the week, former prosecutor who has a perfect record because she suppressed and destroyed evidence. Because she can get there's a concept of ratings, because she can get listens and the the mid-rolls of the world and those guys, they can get their advertising dollars. Like, it can't go in that direction. This genre's come too far for something like that.
I don't think it will. And there's always going to be an element of that. We had, the case that I was talking about today, Renee Bergeron's case. I'm working with a production company about on a docu-series and or podcast about the investigation and about Renee's case and about what it says about victim ranking, about how sex workers' cases are treated versus, missing mom from Connecticut or whatever. And it's not to say that the missing mom isn't important, but this woman was a mom too. And why is she less valuable in the eyes of the investigators or in the eyes of the media? And I won't name names, and I know there's at least one person in the chat room who knows names, but we had a meeting with an exec at a major true crime network who said to me, quote, "We don't really do prostitutes." And it was abundantly clear to both myself and the production company representative who was on the Zoom with me, who immediately shot me a text in all caps that just said, "Fuck them." It was clear we were not going to work with these people. And so, the fact is they're out there. They're always going to be a part of the genre, and you just have to dust off and keep moving forward.
Like,
and know
first of all, it's
stuff.
sex workers.
Right. Yeah. Well, I felt like at that point, if I had to say, and this was a woman, and then she was like, "We're really interested in you and the way you work." And I was like, "Oh, well, because I'm never going to work with you, like in a million years after that, And she, she continued on talking about like, well, people really identify more with, like the blonde cheerleader. And I was like, only because that's what you keep giving us, So
I thought
Greg's back. He's like, wait a minute, I'm going to tell you about this.
Prostitutes.
Oh.
He couldn't log back in fast enough to get on here and
people get on their high horse and they think somehow they're better. I've met prostitutes that are a lot nicer than prosecutors, so it happens. It happens. I mean,
there you go. There you go.
Child gets mixed up in something bad doesn't make them bad.
100%. And 100%. And it doesn't mean it's the whole story either. It doesn't mean it's the whole person or the whole story.
You get to know that, obviously, because you get to know the people. You get to know what they're about and where they're from.
Yeah. Well, and I don't think you have to be a cop to know that. I think you just have to be a decent human being. And I think that that's one of the reasons that true crime needs to present stories like that and not just gloss over them and say, "Oh, well, we should care. And here's a couple pictures of the victim with her family." Like, no, how about let's really tell the stories and get to know their lives and then And then the next time the person who watched that show or listened to that podcast, the next time it pops up in the news, they're going to have a different reaction to it. They're going to see the human value in it. And then the cycle of that is that then feeds back into the way law enforcement handles it because the public is demanding it.
Yeah. And Greg actually went away, but I wanted to mention his comment and your, the conversation that you guys are having was about this perception, and it's very relatable to Brianna Maitland. And Bruce Maitland has asked us before, why do you think that Brianna doesn't get the same amount of attention that Maura Murray gets? The truth is because early on, right off the bat, it was put out there that Brianna Maitland was involved with a group of people that did drugs, and there was a lot of drugs that went on in that area, and that stigma just got attached to her, and I'm going to say this, I don't do this, but no one can sexualize that. You know what I mean? No one can look at that case and say that that's sexy. This drug use in small town America up in upstate Vermont. Like, no one can look at that and say, now I need to solve this because we need justice for that family. It couldn't be more common.
Although it couldn't be more common. It couldn't.
Right.
It couldn't be more American.
Exactly. And
tried.
More than finding out what happened to Brianna, talking about that stigma and trying to change that is just as important. And trying to figure out why she was even in that position is just as important. So I think, Greg, when you came across that early on in your relationship with Bruce, right? I mean, that was a big concern. No one's taking this seriously because Brianna's car was backed into a house, and Brianna was involved with a group that did drugs, and that was it.
It was the weirdest thing because, first of all, the cops said she probably just went to Boston and she'll be back. Said it right to Bruce and Kelly, and Bruce and Kelly are looking back at him. They're like, "Is this a nightmare? What are you talking about? Her migraine medicine." It was
her car's in the middle of a field in a barn. Yeah.
You looked at bringing this car back into this building, and I want to say more than I'm going to say. You'd have to be an idiot to think that it was anything but an accident. Or she didn't drive off the road. Her car wasn't in a ditch. It was purposely put there, or it was, or she stopped and someone shook her up to the point where she crashed it into that. But it wasn't like she slid off the road in the night and hit a tree. And if they couldn't pick up on that, that was just negligent. There was a lot of negligence. And then an officer to come out and talk to a newspaper and say that. My opinion about this, and he was really forward about it. She was involved with doing drugs with some people. She should have been involved with all that stuff. Look, if you feel that way, that's fine. But you talk to your fellow investigators that way. Don't talk to the newspaper that way. It's a huge difference.
Yeah, and I think talking to the fellow investigators is not great either because it taints their own it taints the way they're thinking of the case.
Say, look, this is something we have to consider. She's doing in front of the.
Well, you have to consider it. It's part of the victimology, 100%. 100%. But yes,
but he made some other references that didn't make it in the newspaper that pissed me right off too, and I won't go into that. But I'm going to get all worked up. Don't get me all worked up.
I know.
I'm right here with you.
I'm right here with you.
I'm going to listen.
I love how Greg was in another section of his room, which means that he jumped off. He was still listening, and then he was like, "No." He just sat down.
Yeah. Nope. I gotta get in. I feel like Greg and I are gonna get along very well.
Well, you're gonna have to get along pretty well if you are co-host of the new Crawlspace media show.
That's right. And I wanted to point out that I had sent Robin Warder a message from the Trail Went Cold, and he did write back that this guy, the guy who was indicted for the murder of Jonelle Matthews, was also a patron of Already Gone, The Vanished, and Trace Evidence. which
He
is
was he wasn't a patron of Crawlspace.
I know I can't tell if I'm upset,
Yeah,
like that he is or what,
Fuck
or
him.
what, you know, that he was or was, you know, that he was. I don't know. I can't tell.
could have used his $5 a month. That would have been nice.
Like, but did he? I feel like I might
Right?
be a little offended
Would've
if he
been nice.
listened to the show and didn't like it. But you know what? We never covered that case of the murder that he's fucking indicted for. So fuck him. Yeah. But yeah, we got to talk to Robin
Entirely.
about that. I guess he did a Get Vocal
Yeah.
tonight, where he had got a lot of questions about that. That's a crazy story. I cannot believe it.
But like, wasn't it just bound to happen? Like when you read the story for the first time, weren't you like, "Holy shit, this is crazy"? And then you're like, "Well, that makes sense."
I saw
mean-
the tweet and I was like, oh yeah, no, I retweeted it without even real. And I remember like pull on the phone, put on Twitter, and like looking at this. Like, that was one of the first tweets I saw. Retweeted it, put it back in my pocket. Like, yeah, that makes sense, you know. And it really like took hours to actually sink in how fucked up that was.
Yeah, I think Maggie Freeling had texted us in a group text. She sent the screenshot too, and she referenced Maura's case. You know, I wonder who away. Like I'm paraphrasing. She said, "I wonder who's listening in regards to her case." And
Yeah.
I mean, at first, like you have that emotion. You probably have that a lot as a police officer. You just have that first initial wow, like I can't believe that crazy shit, and then it just sinks in. And you're like, yeah, that makes total sense. Like, yeah, of course that would happen.
Yeah, I don't know. My first reaction to this one was like, this is just the natural, you know, technological evolution of putting out newspaper articles, which is a very real thing. I mean, and we've one of our lead suspects in this Alabama case, one of the things we're examining is his involvement with the scene and you know, stuff like that. So yeah.
Spill the beans, sister.
It's
Is this one
no,
question I didn't get to ask you earlier about that case? Is it a suspected serial case? No spoilers, Celine says.
So of the narrowed pool of suspects. So part of the problem with this case is at the outset, it absolutely does look like a serial kind of case. And there were a minimum of 3 very well-known serials, including Samuel Little, who were active in Mobile at the time and have had other cases in the area attributed to them. Of the 3 that we know of for sure who were running around murdering sex workers in Mobile at the same time that Renee was killed, there was one who was 2 hours away in another city, but his decapitation is pretty rare. And it's even more rare male on female. Like, you'd be surprised how many male on male decaps there are in sexual homicide. Something that was a surprise to me when I learned that working on this case. So for this, there was an active serial who is now in prison, convicted on a number of cases that span between 1994 and 2004. And he certainly is interesting, but quite frankly, he's actually less compelling than a couple of the people who were actually moving around in her life at the time. And in the cases of those people who were moving around in her life at the time, I don't have reason right now to believe that they are, going to turn out to be the next Bundy or the next Samuel Little. Though I would not be surprised to learn that there were certainly other sexual assaults and probably a lot of other violence towards women involved, because this was not somebody's, first turn raising a hand to a woman with what was done to her. But it's, like I said, I can't say too much based on the where we are with the investigation. But there are some facets of the case that could lead this to be sort of a one-off, even though it looks like it's definitely a sexual homicide and it kind of looks like a serial, but it could have been a one-off.
Oh my God. Okay. So we're not going to end the show until you've spilled the entire tea kettle.
Nope. No, that's it. That's as much as even the wine will let me say. And I think my partner Matt Peak was going to jump on at some point. I don't know if he made it all the way through this, but yeah, no, he'll kill me when I get down there this week if I say too much, because we've got to.
Well, you can. We'll just you can tell us. I mean, we're like on good terms with the DA.
Yeah. We'll just text the DA real quick. Absolutely. No big deal.
Yeah. And actually, Celine Beth in the chat here, you can't see it because you got to scroll up a little bit. She was wondering if who you're talking about is as handsome as Ted Bundy.
Oh, God. Just to clarify for anybody who doesn't know Celine Beth, she is 100% being sarcastic about the very strange and gross Bundy fetishizers out there in the world that she and I have discussed at length about. That is one of the absolute shit shows.
I did it.
Don't even get me started, sister.
She jumped on.
What's up, CBC?
Yes, no. But the one thing I wanted Sarah to maybe touch on a little bit in terms of Renee and the...
Celine knows this space well, by the way. She's if COVID ever ends and we ever get to make a docuseries, she's my co-EP on it. One of my co-EPs.
But in terms of the sexual mutilation that I was kind of referring to, there are a lot of weird aspects to it that almost... what is her name? What is her name? Yes. I almost
Black
said Elizabeth Martin. I was like, that's wrong. Elizabeth Short. Yes.
No, Elizabeth Short. So you're close. Yeah.
So the mutilation almost mimicked that in some regards. So that's why, when we had this conversation, like, is this a serial sexual predator? That was kind of the ideology when we initially started looking at pictures.
Right. Yeah. What there are some aspects, like this is what Celine's referencing. There are some aspects of it that look like mimicked behavior, or maybe somebody who had been fascinated with other killers, which would also be an element of this could have been somebody's first time. Although again, this is not something that happens in a vacuum. Yeah. This wasn't like a normal guy walking around who woke up one day and decided to start cutting women's faces open.
But that was just my 2 cents. But no more spoilers. So, okay, love you guys. Bye.
Yeah,
no more spoilers.
That's great. She came on to like to wrangle it in. She's like, no, they're going too far.
Well, we appreciate the pop on by Celine Beth Calderon. So thank you, Celine. What a great night.
Cameo.
I know. Yeah. What a cameo. That we've gone 86 minutes here tonight on Thursday night. This has been a great conversation. I'm so glad we had it. We covered a lot of topics. This is a wide-ranging conversation tonight.
I wish we could recap. I wish we could recap the topics. We really nailed everything.
Point by point.
Okay, so at 9 o'clock, the church bell is tolled from the town center. You're out of
Sarah. Spoke about her background, and then we learned about the new case, Renee Bergeron, and then we talked a bit about that, maybe 20 minutes, half hour, and then Greg popped on, and we talked a little about the Erica Franelich search that we did yesterday, big hole in the ground somewhere in New York.
Defunding the police. That's a bad.
Police. Yeah, and then Greg popped on. I mean, I don't really have to go through it. It's just kind of
no.
We were all here. We were all probably here.
We all heard it. We all heard it. We were all part.
Also, check this book out. Oh my God, I'm reading this. I love this book. I'm almost done with it, Lance. I got like 20 pages left. Look at that.
I'm so proud of you.
Good. Thank you so much. I'm almost prepared to do a full book report. John Billman. It's a really great book on missing people. It's a very good book.
Been raving about it. I get at least 2 or 3 texts a day. Like I'm here from Tim saying I'm here at this point in the book. Yeah, great stuff.
This is no lie. It is a very important book for missing person cases. I believe it. He talks about the David Paulides stuff, which is interesting, the Missing 401 series, and I think a lot of people are curious with that work and. What is his work, David Paulides? Is he a Bigfoot guy? Is he a UFO guy? He talks about these things. He kind of stops talking when you ask him, like, what do you think happened? Oh, I don't know. But then you look at him a little bit more and he does research on Bigfoot and things like that. So you really aren't sure where he's going with it. But I really feel strongly that a book like this needed to come along because he looked at Paulides' work and then took like a macro and a micro view on missing persons in the wilderness. Like, well, I mean, not unlike Maura Murray in a lot of cases that we cover. It's a great book. Please get it.
Good stuff. Great stuff. I'm gonna get to that book after I finish Michael Lister's book that features us. For some reason I'm Space Cold Blood. Cold Blood is Michael Lister's book that is loosely based on the Maura Murray case. And literally the opening of that book, the introduction of that book, is a take on the intro of Missing Maura Murray. And yeah, and it's great. It's a really it's a fictional book, and it's really great. It's a fun read. But yeah, I'm not the book report guy, so I'll take a step back.
Well, I was just going to say, obviously, the next show needs to be a book club.
This one. This one's coming out in about a month. This one, we're actual characters in.
Wait, my book is too far away. My book is too far away, but I'm reading the third in line of the Tana French Dublin murder series. So.
This
fiction, but it's so good. It's so good. I feel like she has to have been.
This one's fiction, too good, but we're actually mentioned in it as a real inspiration to the author, which is really cool. Honestly, I'm trying to find the part here in the acknowledgments. It does mention us a couple times in the book, but yeah, I don't know. I can't find it, but.
You guys are so funny. We're not reading the book, but I'm going straight to the index. I went back, find my name. Yeah.
I don't know. We're going to have her on, Elizabeth Breck. She's going to come on soon. Check this book out. Yeah. All right, everybody. Woo-hoo. Thanks a lot.
Hey, yeah, one more quick thing. This is going out there.
Thank you so much, you guys.
We're still broadcasting. I want to reiterate, boycott every goddamn sponsor that is on Anatomy of Murder.
Unless
Retweet
they're
that.
our sponsor too.
Unless they're our sponsor. Unless they're Best Fiends. If they're Best Fiends, then you need to play Best Fiends. It's a great way to kick back. You don't even need Wi-Fi.
That's right. You can play offline.
Oh yeah,
and
naked wines. Yep.
Naked wines.
Yeah.
We need them to come on too. Yeah, exactly. We're just going to start.
So boycott their sponsors unless it's Naked Wine or Best Fiends. Maybe HelloFresh if we could get HelloFresh back and Madison Reed. So if it's any sponsor outside of those guys, boycott them.
Boycott them. Every product. All right, everybody.
Check with us first though.
Yeah, I'm also just annoyed that it's such a near ripoff of John Douglas's second book title, which is The Anatomy of Motive.
Oh yes, and BetterHelp. Yes, Jason, BetterHelp. Don't boycott them. Yeah. Actually, check in with us first before you boycott them.
I just started.
Yeah.
Like, don't boycott anybody. Just don't listen to the podcast.
Well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us here tonight. This was a great night. Yeah.
Great episode.
We win, Sarah.
This is really long.
We went
thank you so much,
half past the hour. We had the bottom of the hour, 10:33.
This is officially the longest.
No, it's
I'm from here. Don't tell me. We've changed our ways, Sarah. We've changed our ways.
No,
the longest show we've ever done.
This is not.
I'm just doing an impression of you.
This is going to go in my report card, isn't it? This is just like every report card when I was a kid. Sarah's a joy to having class.
She's a bit too opinionated. All right. Good stuff, guys.
I'll get my wig. Thank you, Andy.
All right.
All right, everybody. Thanks a lot for joining us. We will see you next week. This is a lot of fun.
Thank you, guys.
See ya.
All right.
Have a good one.
Okay.